Hey everyone, Steve from Backcountry Gallery here, and today we'll look at another 7 incredible Nikon tips and tricks that I know you're going to love. If you missed the first 7, make sure to click the link on the card above. That video is the most popular one I have ever uploaded. As with the first video, not every tip will apply to every Nikon camera, and none of these apply to the D3000 series, but pretty much everyone else with a current Nikon camera will find a few they can use. And finally, make sure you click that subscribe button so you never miss a video. Also, don't forget, videos are only half of what I do. Check out all the free articles at my site as well, and make sure you sign up for my free email newsletter so you never miss a post. So let's dive into these 7 tips and tricks. Tip number 1, save your settings. Have you ever lost your camera settings? You know how it is. Maybe you had all your menus set perfectly, but you had to do a reset or maybe send it back in for repair or something. Heck, there may have even been times you were messing around in the menus and now you can't quite get things back to the way they were. Well, did you know that many Nikon cameras allow you to save your settings? If you have your settings saved and need to reset the camera, or if you accidentally mess things up, you can just reload those settings and be right back to where you were, sort of like a backup system for your camera. How do you do it? Like so.
Okay, our first step is to go ahead and pop a memory card in the camera, and then go ahead and format that as long as there's no pictures on there that you want to keep. Next, head to your Setup menu and scroll all the way down to the Save Load Settings option. Click that, and then select Save Settings. Just like that, your settings are instantly saved to your memory card. Now, I want to prove to you that this works, so I'm going to go ahead and reset the camera. But first, let me show you that I do indeed have some settings in here. We'll just look at the custom setting menu right now, but I do want you to note that this will also save settings in the photo shooting and setup menus too. But for right now, anything that you see with an asterisk here is a setting that I've adjusted that's not the default setting anymore. And you can see I have quite a few of them in here that I've made a little bit of modifications to. So there are settings in this menu that have been adjusted. So let's go ahead and reset the camera. I can do that through my Setup menu and Reset All Settings. I'm going to go ahead and click that, hit Reset, and when I hit Yes, this is going to go ahead and completely reset my camera. Okay, the camera has been reset, and just to prove that to you, I'm going to go back to the custom setting menu here, and we'll go under autofocus, and you can see A7 we had stuff set there, the asterisk is gone, everything is back to default. No more little stars and asterisks above any of those numbers and letters down there, so the camera has indeed been reset. So let's go ahead and restore it. We're going to go back to the Setup menu, scroll all the way down to our Save Load Settings option, and this time, since the memory card is in the camera and it does have that file on it, the saved settings file, I can just go ahead and click Load Settings. 1 second there, it's all set. Let me prove it to you. Back to the custom setting menu here, and let's click autofocus, and you can see A7 now has the little asterisk next to it, as does A8 and A9. All of my settings have been restored to the custom setting menu, as well as most of the settings in the setup menu and the photo shooting menu. So very handy.
As a side note, this doesn't save every setting, and what it does save can vary by body, especially things for like AF modes, metering modes, exposure modes, that sort of thing. It does save the important stuff though, and can save you a lot of time if you ever need to reset up your camera. This can also be useful if you have 2 of the same body, like a pair of D850s for instance. You can set up one camera and save the settings to the other. Note, however, that this doesn't work between different bodies, like a D500 or D7500 for instance. Tip number 2, rename your files. You know how your Nikons like to name every single file starting with DSC and then the file number? That's all well and good unless you have multiple cameras. If you load the images from all your cameras into a single folder, like maybe when you're on a trip for instance, you may discover that you have a problem with duplicate file names. Additionally, if you have an issue with one camera, it's hard to tell just from looking at the file name which camera is the problem child. Sure, you can sort through the metadata, but if you have a pair of identical bodies, good luck telling them apart. Well, unless you name your file prefix something other than the default Nikon setting. Instead of starting out with a DSC, maybe use something else. Anything works. For example, I use 500 for my D500, 850 for my D850, and ND5 for my D5. For duplicate bodies, I use the first two digits and then a number. For example, for a pair of D750s, I would use 751 and 752. Doesn't really matter as long as the names are different. To set this up, just head to your photo shooting menu and then to the file naming option. Click that, and on the next screen you'll have an input area so you can choose the file name of your choice for that particular body. Once set, the camera will use the file name you assign it as a prefix for all the images it produces. Tip number 3, Viewfinder Level. I recently mentioned this technique in another video, but everyone loved it so much I wanted to make sure it was in the tip video as well. On my Nikons, I have my joystick set so when I push it in, it activates the artificial horizon in the viewfinder. This will show me if I'm tilted one way or the other and stays on until I press the joystick button again or the meter shuts off. This is a very handy interactive way to quickly verify if you are actually straight as you shoot. I use this all the time for both wildlife and landscape work, and it makes keeping level like 1,000% easier.
Now, setup varies depending on the age of your camera. In this first section, we'll look at the older menu system in cameras introduced prior to 2016. In a moment, we'll look at setup for the newer menu system. So, for the prior to 2016 menu, we go down to our custom setting menu and hit Controls. And then we decide which button we want to assign. Both the preview button and the function button on this D750 I'm using for my example support Viewfinder Virtual Horizon. You may have other buttons depending on how advanced your camera is that also support that feature. But for now, let's go ahead and assign it to the preview button. We click that. We want to take the press option from the next screen. Right now I have mine set for preview, but we want Virtual Horizon, so we're going to scroll all the way down to Viewfinder Virtual Horizon. Hit OK, and we're all set. Now when we press our preview button as we're looking through the viewfinder, you'll see the level come on right at the bottom of the viewfinder for you there. Okay, if you happen to have one of the newer Nikons, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to Controls, and this time you're going to go to F1, Custom Control Assignment. You'll see the new menu here. You want to stick to the options on the left. Those are the ones that allow you to go ahead and push a button to have something happen. We don't need the push and turn options on the right. You can assign the Viewfinder Virtual Horizon to the PV, FN1, or the sub-selector, the joystick, center push. I'm going to go ahead and put it on my center push. Again, feel free to use this on the PV or FN1 button. Setup is the same. Right now it's set to center my focus point, but that's not what I want. I'm going to go all the way down here to Viewfinder Virtual Horizon. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm all set.
Once set, just press the button and look along the bottom of the viewfinder. As you tip the camera left and right, you'll see the scale fluctuate as you do. When it's centered up, you're completely level. Tip number 4, high-speed flash sync. As you know, most of the time you can't use your flash above the camera's sync speed, typically 1/250th or 1/25th of a second. The problem is sometimes you need more shutter speed than that. In fact, if you like to shoot fast lenses, wide open out in bright light with fill flash, this is a particularly troublesome problem. Well, there's an easy solution on most Nikons called Auto FP. This setting allows you to use shutter speeds that are much faster than the normal sync speed with a supported flash unit. The only downside is that your flash range is diminished, so this works best for closer subjects. At any rate, to set it up, head to your Custom Settings menu and select Bracketing Flash. Next, press Flash Sync Speed. In this menu, you'll notice both normal shutter speeds and one or two with Auto FP next to them. I usually select the Auto FP speed that corresponds to my fastest normal sync speed. Select that and hit OK. That's it. Now you can crank your shutter speed up past your normal sync speed, in fact, usually as high as the camera's maximum shutter speed. Tip number 5, easy ISO and easy exposure compensation. This next one is sort of a double. Have you ever wished there was a super fast way to adjust exposure compensation or ISO? I don't know, maybe something where you don't need to press buttons and spin dials at the same time. You know, something where you can maybe do it without even looking away from the viewfinder. Well, most Nikon mid-range and pro bodies have an option for either easy ISO or easy exposure compensation, or sometimes even both. When you're in an auto exposure mode, these features allow you to turn one of the command dials to instantly change your ISO or exposure compensation value. This is incredibly handy for fast-paced situations. However, even if your camera supports both options, you can only use one at a time. I'm more of an easy exposure compensation guy, but it's up to you. First, let's talk about setup, then we'll talk about how to use it. For easy ISO, there are two places for setup depending on your camera, but please note that this is the least common of the two options, and it's definitely not found on cameras with the ISO button next to the shutter release. To see if your camera supports it, just do the following. Head to the Shooting Display menu and look for an item called Easy ISO. If you see it, give it a press and turn it on. All set. If you don't see that option, all is not lost. Instead, look at the Shooting Display menu and look for ISO Display and Adjustment. If you see that option, give it a click. On the next menu, select Show ISO/Easy ISO, and you're all set. Now, if you're more of an exposure compensation photographer, or maybe that's all your camera supports, you'll want to look under the Metering/Exposure menu for an option called Easy Exposure Compensation. Click that and select On or On Auto Reset from the resulting menu. The Auto Reset option will zero exposure compensation back out when the camera goes on standby. Now, I personally avoid that one since it's too easy for the camera to go into standby mode, and then you start shooting thinking you have exposure compensation set. When you no longer do, it's a mess. Either way, make your choice and click OK. Usage is really easy, and it works the same for both options. To adjust an aperture priority, just spin the main command dial on the back of the camera. As you do, you'll dial in exposure compensation or change your ISO depending on your choice. For program or shutter priority, it's the subcommand dial on the front. And sorry, this one does not work in manual mode since you need those dials for exposure adjustment. Tip number 6, Viewfinder Grid. A few tips ago, we looked at the Viewfinder Virtual Horizon, but there's another feature I like to use to help keep things level, and that's the Viewfinder Grid. When turned on, your viewfinder will go from the standard layout to a grid layout that looks like this. I really like this feature for action. It's a really nice guide and helps me keep my horizons level without really taking my concentration away from my subjects. To turn it on, just head to the Custom Settings menu, Shooting Display, and from there head to Viewfinder Grid Display. It's just an on or off choice, so turn it on, give it a try. Note that this doesn't work at the same time as the Viewfinder Virtual Horizon. So when you turn the viewfinder level on, the grid turns off. When the viewfinder level goes back off, the grid comes back on. Tip number 7, Exposure Delay Mode. This is a really handy feature that's often overlooked. If you ever do exposures in the 1/4 second to 1/30th of a second range, you know that tapping the shutter release button can sometimes cause a touch of blur. Ideally, you could use a cable release, but if you don't have one along, this can be just as good. This feature allows you to set a short delay of 1, 2, or 3 seconds when you press the shutter release. So you can gently press the release, pull your finger away, and the camera will wait a moment before snapping the photo, allowing any movement you caused to dissipate. To enable it, just head to the Custom Setting menu, Shooting Display, and then select Exposure Delay. On the next screen, you can select your delay amount. I usually go for 2 or 3 seconds. The longer the lens, the longer my delay. Now, if you like these tips, you'll love my ebooks, Secrets to the Nikon Autofocus System, Secrets to Studying Wildlife Photography, and, coming soon, Secrets to the Nikon Exposure System. All the books are jam-packed with hundreds of tips, tricks, and techniques to help you bring your photography to the next level. The books are very good at taking complex topics and making them very easy for anyone to understand. Think of it like a supercharger for your photography. Finally, remember to subscribe, and thanks again for watching. Have a great day.